Orders of the day.
Private members notice of motion number 117. Mr. Hardeman.
Recognize the member from Oxford.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move that in the opinion of this House, the Government of Ontario should conduct a comprehensive review of practices in the funeral, burial and cremation services sector to ensure they prioritize protecting vulnerable families in their time of bereavement, promote freedom of choice and access to third-party sellers, and determine if the current rules and framework under the Funeral, Burial and Cremation Services Act 2002 are fair and achieve the highest level of consumer protection.
Mr. Hardeman has moved private member's notice of motion number 117. Pursuant to Standing Order 100, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's an honour to bring forward this motion to the House, and it's about a very important issue that we all end up dealing with at some point in our lives: Ontario's funeral, burial and cremation services sector. Our government takes consumer protection very seriously, and consumer protection in the bereavement sector are especially important. That's because when you have to make decisions about honouring departed loved ones, we are at one point of the most vulnerable points in our lives. This situation where people can be easily taken advantage of and be pressured to buy beyond their means. It's also a situation where people might not know that they've been taken advantage of until after the fact. That's why the government has the duty to ensure that a strong consumer protections in the bereavement sector before any purchases are made. Not only that, but Ontarians expect it. Now, first, I would like to talk a little bit about the current legislation and the framework governing the bereavement sector. Historically in Ontario, funeral services, cemetery services, and monument services were all separate. In 2002, the Minister of Consumer and Business Services at the time, Tim Hudak, introduced the Funeral, Burial and Cremation Services Act. The legislation allowed what was called combination cemeteries. These are facilities that offer a combination of funeral, cemetery and monument services, allowing people to have the convenience of making their bereavement arrangements all in one place if they prefer. There are also the recognition that allowing these combinations in Ontario would lead to tithe selling. Now, tithe selling is a very unfair practice. When consumers are pressured to or forced to purchase a certain product on the condition that they also purchase some other product from the seller. This could be applied through extra fees that do not reflect direct cost, or by refusing to accept third-party products, just to name a few. Because of this, Mr. Hudak put forward very strong consumer protections in the legislation to ensure that these combinations could not use their potential monopoly to stop families from having the freedom to choose a third-party seller if that's what they wished. And I'm going to quote from Mr. Hudak, who said in 2002 during the original debate, "If a consumer wants to buy a grave marker from a shop of greater reputation that has supplied the family for generations, or shop from one who offers better price or quality, or he or she would be able to do just that." He said he wanted to stop situations where somebody, quote, where somebody who is buying a service is told they can only buy the gravestone from a particular site, and if they don't buy the gravestone from that site, there's an additional administrative fee put on top. After it passed, Mr. Hudak was asked in question period how it would improve consumer protection in the sector. He responded by saying that when implemented, the legislation would, quote, attack tithe selling, a reprehensible practice that limits consumer option. All this to say, tithe selling should be strictly prohibited in Ontario's bereavement sector. So why then did I introduce this motion? Well, Madam Speaker, last year I met with the people from the independent monument sector, and some of them are in the audience here tonight, and with my constituents, and they brought to my attention that tithe selling still occurs in Ontario's bereavement sector. The current framework is not achieving the level of consumer protection that Ontarians expect. Monument makers sell their products as a whole, including installation, so the installation fee is included in the price that they charge. However, the independent monument builders showed me bylaws from combinations that said that say that the combination is the only one allowed to install all monuments, no matter if they are from the combination or from a third party. The issue is that the combination then charges the high installation fee of $560 or more to families because they have that monopoly over who installs monuments in their cemetery. That on top of the $100 administrative fee that they charge for third-party monuments as well. This was supposed to be prohibited. Here's another example of tide selling. They showed me a receipt for $1,070 for a foundation from a combination. However, the combination forces families to buy the foundation from them exclusively. Now, a third-party foundation maker that the monument builders work with sells that same product for $504. This is over double the price, Madam Speaker, and the grieving families have no choice but to pay it because the combination refuses to accept third-party foundations. It hurts vulnerable families because it definitely isn't a direct cost. As I said before, this is simply unfair and does not allow people to have the full knowledge or choice of what they can buy and the services for their loved one. A small funeral home owner in my riding told me of another area where consumers aren't being adequately protected. Exclusive dealing. It's another very unfair practice. It's when sellers limit the rights of people to choose who they want to deal with. In other words, the seller forces the consumer to deal with them exclusively. In the bereavement sector, they told me that some combination cemeteries are not recognizing limited power of attorney. That is, it is designated to an independent monument builder to act on bereaved families' behalf with matters regarding the monument. Families might do this because they're feeling pressured and would like to withdraw from dealing with the staff, or because they live far away from the cemetery and doing this is a more convenient option. But currently he's told that the cemetery can request to speak with the bereaved family in person only, where they then aggressively push their monument product. This doesn't allow people to deal with the operator that they feel most comfortable with, or give them a convenient option if they live far away. It doesn't put the bereaved family first. Overall, this showed me that the people are being taken advantage of at a time when they are extremely vulnerable. That's exactly what Mr. Hudak wanted to stop in Ontario. But if that was the original intent, why are these practices still happening? It's because it took an unusual 10 years of the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act to come into force after it was passed in 2002. During that time, the previous Liberal government watered it down a lot to the consumer protection in the legislation by developing ineffective regulations. If we're hearing complaints and it was watered down framework, then why would we not review to make sure that this does not continue? We can see that tide selling and other unfair practices are exactly what the original version of the bill was trying to stop. Why would we not want to make sure that the Act lives up to its original intent when it comes to consumer protection? That's why I introduced this motion. The Ministry of Public and Business Service Delivery should conduct a comprehensive review of the practices of the bereavement sector to make sure that the grieving families are put first. That was the original intent and also what Ontarians expect when it comes to consumer protection. Just a few years ago, the Auditor General did an audit of the bereavement sector, and she found that the current consumer protection measures are weak in Ontario. Her words. In the report, she said that the best way to protect transparency and choice is through comparative shopping. If people are not satisfied by the product or price that the combination offers, they can look elsewhere. If tide selling and exclusive dealings are allowed to happen, combinations can use their monopoly power to effectively stop comparison shopping. Now, having said that, the Auditor General's report did not focus on tide selling, or exclusive dealing rather. It was on the availability of price lists. I think that was an oversight, because even with widely available price lists, grieving families can't truly comparison shop. If unreasonable barriers continue to be put in place if they choose to purchase from a third-party seller. And with the rising cost of living, bereavement services are expensive enough. I don't believe that grieving families during one of the most vulnerable times in their lives should be taken advantage of with fees that do not reflect direct costs just because they want to buy a monument from a maker that they are most comfortable with. I don't think they should be forced to buy a foundation from a particular supplier either, and I don't think that cemeteries should be allowed to engage in exclusive dealing by refusing to recognize limited power of attorney. Again, that's why we should conduct a comprehensive review of the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act. The current framework is obviously not properly protecting Ontarians. Madam Speaker, most operators in the bereavement sector hold themselves to the highest standards of ethics and want to make sure that grieving families honour their loved ones in the way they see fit. However, we have to make sure that they are also protected from the handful of bad actors that are out there, because honouring a loved one is one of the biggest decisions that people make in their lives. And because most people don't know they've been had until after the fact, they need to make sure that families are protected before they make that purchase. We will do just that if this motion is passed. With the review, we will ensure that we are protecting grieving families from unfair practices like tide selling, exclusive dealing, and ensure they have the freedom of choice to purchase products and services from the operator of their choosing, and that Ontario has some of the strongest consumer protection measures for the bereavement sector in North America. That's what Ontarians expect from their government, and that's what I want to give them.
Further debate?